So, okay, what do you disagree with me on?
Like everything. Like I would say I'm probably the most left-leaning here. Like I'm more like socialist, communist.
That's a good place to start. Okay.
Right there.
So you're socialist / communist.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you think what's like the tenet of communism? You don't believe that?
Do you believe in private property?
Yeah. Do you believe in? That's what else.
See, it's really hard to navigate these kinds of conversations, but it's basically like you can look at how we kind of are, like America right now, and how we are like economically. Like most Americans are living like under the poverty line, you know what I mean? And like even people who are getting $100,000 salary, $200,000, they're living paycheck to paycheck. And I just think everybody, like, livable wages should be happening, you know what I mean?
Can
Cost
you
of living shouldn't be so
point
high.
me to an example where communism or socialism provided a better quality of life than the life in America?
I think Cuba was really promising up until the U.S. like started putting
Do you realize how much of
restrictions on
a shithole Cuba is?
That's because of the United States.
So you don't think it's the fact that the government went and nationalized everything and they put Che Guevara in as the head of economics in Cuba, somebody who had never done that before? They nationalized the industries. You don't think that a bunch of guerrilla warfare fighters coming into Havana and taking over the country?
I think Cuba had a promising chance up until the United States started putting like restrictions on Cuba. And that's part of the reason why Cuba is so poor now.
But do you not think that it was like there was a part of it that might have been the socialist factor, the fact that they nationalized everything and didn't know what they were doing?
I mean, I can agree with you to the point that it hasn't been like as effective as it could have been played out, like in any case. So it hasn't successfully like.
Okay, so Cuba's not a good example. Do you have another good example of another country that has done a good job with socialism and communism?
No.
Do you know it's been tried many times? Soviet Union did it, no good. China did it, Vietnam did it, Laos did it, Cambodia did it.
Okay, but capitalism isn't doing great either.
Capitalism's doing a lot better than communism. A lot better. And if you look at the rise in the third world at the moment, that's all because of free markets, and it's all because of cheap energy and all of these things that capitalism provides.
Thanks, Killian. Wait, would you like to see the US become a communist country?
I think like there needs to be like kind of how communism is laid out. Like I still think there's flaws within that, right? Like I'm not trying to say it's the perfect solution. I just think on a baseline it would be more effective. Like most people would have a better quality of life.
Would there? Here, we'll let
Brandon Lee donated $100.
Oh.
Another vapid 304 selling her flesh while whining about capitalism. Do you not realize what you are doing is capitalism?
Do you have a response to Brandon Lee here?
Yeah, so I live in a capitalist country. Why would I not do what I can to have the best quality of life I could? Just because I believe in something doesn't mean that I should struggle or be poverty stricken.
What is, I think there is actually a good counter argument to this. Maybe Jake, you're familiar with it. This whole like, well, because I think it's really important that like your side, whatever side, puts forth like really solid arguments. And I think the counter to that is like typically people, when it comes to communism, they'll argue, well, you have an iPhone. But I don't think that's a very compelling argument, because like people are going to, if they're born into society, they're going to have to maneuver through that society with the rules that have been placed. So there's
having an iPhone in the eyes of a communist, that having an iPhone is a bad thing.
No, it's more so just, and I'm not in favor of communism, but I'm just trying to steelman the capitalist position. Like, I'm not sure if the best argument is, well, you engage in capitalism, so why are you in favor of communism?
Oh yeah.
Do you like? I can't think of the steelman for it, but Brandon Lee, I appreciate
because Brandon kind of said that she's engaging in capitalism. But you do live in a capitalist society, and I'm not saying there's no problems with capitalism, but by far and away, it's the best system we've ever tried. And you just have to look at the evidence. And you can literally, I went to Korea last year, and I went to South Korea, and I went to the demilitarized zone, which is on the border of North Korea, and it is night and day between those two countries, because one of them embraced a Soviet-style communist system or socialist system, and one of them embraced a Western-style capitalist system. You go to Cambodia, and you look at what happens when the Khmer Rouge came and took over. Absolute brutality. And that's because equality has to be forced, because human beings are inherently different.
before you respond, we're not going to linger too long. We're not going to linger too long on this
Motorsports
topic.
donated $100. Tell me you know jack crap about economics in plain language. Check. In the little box on your tax return where it asks how much extra you want to pay, how much do you write in? Bet it is 0.
What?
In the little box on your tax return,
Yeah.
when it asks how much extra you want to pay.
But I think essentially what you're saying is that there's economic disparity in America, and you're saying that it's unfair.
Yeah.
It is unfair, but life's unfair. And we can do better, certainly, but I'm telling you, and I can explain it to you more if you'd like throughout the podcast, communism, not the answer. There are answers, communism, not it.
I have
I
a
think
question.
it's-
Could I ask you a question about
Yeah.
it? Just to get more of a sense of what you believe. You said that you can't really tell us exactly what country has socialism that you can point to and say that's a positive. If there was one, would you move there and then give up the work that you do because you wouldn't be able to do it under that? Governmental
Yeah,
structure?
like I would give up my work to have on a baseline be around a community where there's a higher quality of life than America.
But didn't you say that you can't point to a country that has that? So where would you go?
No, I'm saying communism and socialism is kind of the closest thing to what I believe in. I haven't seen it played out, and it's not exactly that, but it would be the closest thing to kind of put language into it.
So how can you believe that something is great if you've never seen it be great?
I never said it was great. I said it's what I believe to be the best system.
Have you seen
So
it
it's the
be
best,
great?
not
Has
great.
communism ever worked?
No.
And this is what
I don't
I'm
think
saying.
so.
It's the closest thing to what I believe in.
But I think
So it
that
would
when
be
you just look at it
the
on
closest
the
solution.
raw facts, though, communism was responsible for the death of north of 100 million people in the 20th century. So when you look at that ideology and you say, you know what, I think we should try it again, you'd have your detractors. Okay, but I do get what you're saying, because
I
you
also think part of
you
it
believe
is
in
that-
inequality, and you think that and you've arrived at this. Do you go to university or college?
I dropped out.
Okay.
before-
Did you hear a little bit of this sort of rhetoric / propaganda at university? Is that where you pick these ideas up? Yeah.
Yeah, but I also think it's really tricky because we're all we have a capitalist scope on things, so it's the way we're viewing communism is also through how we've been socialized and how our
You can
brains
go
are
to
kind of,
communist countries, see how it is. I've been to
yeah,
many
but
of
I
them.
haven't had the opportunity yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm still very young, and there's a lot
I
of
understand,
things
because
that
when I was your age, I actually used to think similarly. I used to be like a Bernie Sanders bro, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I used to love it. I used to think, so everyone can just be equal and it'll be the best. But then after a while, when you look into it and you realize that actually it's manufactured equality, and when you try and manufacture equality, it leads to brutality. But keep going, you'll get there.
Brandon Lee donated $100.
Thank you, Brandon.
There is no country that makes the example of communism to be anywhere near our current society. Your learning life has failed you. Stick to learning about how to get guys off.
Do you have a response to Brandon Lee?
I don't know, he's tipping a lot for this, so
Redirect him.
Yeah. So thank you, Brandon. Appreciate it. I have a question. So, look, I'm not super well versed in this topic, but under communism, would there be currency?
Yeah.
There'd be currency, so there'd be we'd still have U.S. dollars.
So what I'm trying to say, right, is that I don't fully believe in communism as how communism is. That's just the closest thing to what I believe in, and that's why I was trying to address some of the things that I do believe in. I think there should be a baseline of livable wages and things like that.
Wait, but
so it's
okay.
more so things that I would like to have for the community as a whole.
Doc Vinably donated $100. Cuba is 90 miles from Key West. You can swim there. Once there,
You're in
the
Miami,
bread lines
right?
will help you get
Yeah.
even skinnier. Good luck finding a good hookup for your of. Genius.
Would you consider, how's your swimming?
Decent, I guess.
Wait, if you were to swim from Miami to Cuba, would it be a breaststroke? Would it be butterfly?
Maybe a
What's your
backstroke.
preferred backstroke? That would be a good
Yeah.
way to get there. Thank you, Doc Vanablis. Good to see you in the chat. Well, okay, so under communism, let's say there's somebody who's a doctor and then somebody who's a secretary. How are they, are they both compensated equally, the same amount?
Yeah.
So the secretary, who need not spend hundreds, thousands of hours attaining secondary, like other forms of education, she's compensated just as well as the doctor. So what's the incentive for somebody in a communist society where everything is supposedly provided for them to like put in all this extra effort? Like, also, what about who wants to be a janitor, or who wants a dirty or dangerous job under communism? Wouldn't everybody just want to
So
do
there
the
are
most?
some places that aren't communist, but they do like have certain like other developed countries, like the Netherlands, right, where they have a pretty high quality.
You
of
think
life.
that
capitalist
the
country. No,
Netherlands
it's
is
not
I've been
communist, but
I've been there 3 times. It's not
getting there. I'm getting to the point that I'm
Okay.
making. I'm not saying it's a communist,
but
whatever.
You
But they have like livable wages and higher taxes, right? And one of the things you look at is when everyone has enough to live, the incentive to make more money, or a lot of Europe like doesn't have a lot of millionaires because there's not that drive to have this excess of wealth when you can survive. That it's just not natural. You know what I mean? Like,
Can I ask
the
something?
Netherlands.
Getting rid of like the labels capitalism, socialism, communism, can you give us like an idea of what the ideal society system would be? Like, you don't have to stick to any names, just like if I were in charge, if I could set up a country to run a certain way, how would you want it to run? Like, specifically.
okay, like, is there like one avenue, like economics?
Yeah,
or, like-
economically.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like that's a little bit better too, because I feel like trying to stick to a label, but that would be the closest thing. I think equal pay for everyone would be like a good start. There would still be an incentive. People still want to be doctors without pay. I mean,
think
Cuba
that-
actually has the highest.
What was it?
Hunter donated $100. Daphne drinking the water that turns the frogs gay.
It does turn the frogs gay.
So you said that.
I want to hear her answer.
Yeah. She just said that there would be incentives, and I'm saying
Yeah,
that. Do you think
Cuba-
that there would be incentives? Like, do you think that we would get the best quality though?
I mean, yeah, that's why I believe in it. But also, like you said, what would be the incentive to become like a doctor or something like that when Cuba has the most doctors per capita? You know what I mean? Like, people still want to be doctors. People naturally want to help each other.
Do you think they're good? They're the best doctors?
Well, I don't know. I can't.
What's the
speak
life
for that.
expectancy in Cuba?
Probably lower than here, but you can't really trust the government's numbers though.
That's fair.
Yeah. This is the problem in Cuba. Though. I've got my barber back in Brisbane is Cuban. Shout outs to Yaz. And his mum is a doctor. And he says that she basically makes the same as somebody who flips burgers in the United States. She just makes absolutely no money. And she's a doctor.
Mount_Everest donated $100. Communism has failed and will fail at every nation that has tried. RFK Jr. 2024.
Yep. So I mean, it's just human nature though that the reason why people strive to be the best and succeed is because they get paid more and they get more prestige. But in those countries, there is no prestige with those jobs. They're slaves. Any other economic policies? Because you mentioned Netherlands and
Yeah, so they have high taxes.
Hold on.
Alfie donated $100. My philosophy, best summed up by the only advice my father ever gave me. He said, son, whenever you meet a beautiful woman, just remember, somewhere there's a bloke who's sick of shagging her.
Thank you, Alfie. That is a bit more dating related. I appreciate it. Thanks, Alfie. I think you were going to ask her a follow-up question.
Yeah, so you mentioned the Netherlands, and what is it particularly the social safety nets? Like, because when you talk about Scandinavian countries, I think that a lot of people refer to their social safety nets and these things that they've got going on. Is that what you like about those countries, that they've got robust social safety nets?
Yeah, and they also like have the highest quality of life. Like, people are happiest there than anywhere else, which I think says something, you know what I mean? Because people complain in the States about high taxes, but it's what we're doing with that tax money when we're asking for more, when the government's asking for more.
Well, they have some pretty high SUI rates in those Nordic countries. But with the social safety nets though, do you understand that it's like comparing apples and oranges when you compare America to the Scandinavian countries? Because for a number of reasons. First of all, they're very, very resource rich. Like a country like Norway has more money than it knows what to do with it. So like these countries are they just throw money into these social programs.
What's the population? Like 10? No, it's like 4 million in Norway or something.
And also they're very, very culturally homogenous as well. They're very strict with immigration. You don't have that in America. You guys pay a price for how lenient you are with your borders and everything. So it's comparing apples and oranges. But they do have, I have spent time in some of those countries, especially Holland, and they do have social safety nets, but they're pretty different to those countries to here.
I have a question. So do you think that your life would be better? Like, how would it personally affect you if the United States was more socialist?
I think that's
or worse.
Interesting. I don't know. I think it would have affected me probably a couple, like 2 years ago, more so than now.
Doc Venabilis donated $100. Doctors are used as slave labor in Cuba. The doctors are sent to work in Mexico and Venezuela, and those countries pay Cuba. Doctors earn $30 a month within Cuba. Cab drivers earn much more.
Doc Venabilis, thank you very much. That's a good point. Like, what, under a communist society, like, what is the incentive to work hard if the person who doesn't even work gets the same exact benefits and privileges as you?
It becomes like more personal and less on survival. So one of the things why money is an incentive is because money raises your quality of life here. Like, people still have an incentive to be doctors there because naturally there are some people who want to help people, like in other ways than just how much this is going to pay me or how little this is going to pay me.
You mentioned that did you just say that it would have benefited you a little while ago, but not anymore? Is that because you make more money now? Because you're doing what you're doing?
So I benefit from capitalism now.
But if you weren't benefiting from it, then you'd want to live in a socialist community.
No, I would want to either way, but I am saying that I do benefit from capitalism.
So you're benefiting from capitalism now means you see capitalism in a good light because you're benefiting from it, right? But if you weren't...
I still see the flaws in it, but I do benefit from it.
So if you were making a lot of money right now, you'd want to give like most of that money away?
I do give a decent amount of the money that I make away. I definitely...
Stop the cap!
What do you mean you give it away?
Where do you give it?
Like, not only that, but like in my daily life, but also I like donate. Like, I also like...
To who? Who'd you donate to?
Like, things I believe in. Like, it's not one specific thing. It kind of changes as it fluctuates.
What percentage would you say you donate?
I don't have an exact percentage.
Like, roughly?
Or like a couple organizations? Like any organization you've donated to?
3 nonprofits. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm like getting nervous, but one of the things, like, also in my daily life is like I give to people that I know, you know what I mean? Like,
but what 3 organizations? 3 anything? Just 2?
I'm trying to think. Like,
Yeah, sometimes it'll escape you. We understand. Look, I appreciate you actually having this conversation because I know it feels like there's like a lot of people ganging up on you right now. But you did come and say you're a socialist communist.
Yeah,
so it's quite the starting point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways.
Well, the reason I'm asking is the reason you want it is because you want people to, like, do you feel like some people are entitled to other people's money? Because that's basically what socialism is.
I don't think like other people are entitled to other people's money, but I think everyone should be, like, I don't think people should be living on the street, you know what I mean, on a baseline. Like, I think the wealth disparity in the United States is like a crisis. That's what I'm trying to get at.
The notion that you're talking about where people will become doctors just because they want to help people and stuff, it's so verifiably untrue. Even if you look at the example that you said, Cuba. When Che Guevara was in charge of the finances there, he ran this big campaign where he was going to get everybody to rally around the nation and everybody to rally around Cuba and to do their work, and it failed so miserably because people were just like, but you're like, we're not really paying us, so like, why would we do it? And there was a saying in the Soviet Union that was, they pretend to pay us, we pretend to work, which meant that the government just pretends to pay us and we just pretend to do the work. So nothing actually gets done. But when you look at a capitalist system, for all its flaws, and you know, you've done a good job in identifying some of the flaws, one of the biggest strengths is that people are incentivized. You can literally come from the bottom, and we have such social and economic mobilization in capitalist countries that you can get to the absolute top. And there are many examples of that. But if you go to countries that have been decimated by communism, like when you spend time in Cambodia, the only people that are rich are the high-level military personnel and government. That's it.
A great example of a country that socialism has taken over is Venezuela. They were doing better than the United States economically, and then they actually voted in socialism. It's one of the few countries they voted in, and it wasn't even a dictator that took over anything. And then now, like, they wouldn't even be able to afford like a meal for their family a week. They have, like, the inflation was so bad because the government just kept on printing more and more money. And that's honestly also what's happening in the States. It's because more socialist policies have been implemented, and that's actually lowered the standard of living because we've been printing more and more money.
There are some correlations there. But yeah, Venezuela, like she said, it's another good example. And there was a guy named Hugo Chavez in the 1990s that was president of Venezuela. And Venezuela at this time was one of the burgeoning countries in the world economically, and they had all these like natural resources and they were killing it, and all these celebrities were going to Venezuela, and it was amazing. And then he brought in socialism, and this is where he nationalized the industries. And this is one of the great dangers of socialism, which is what maybe you haven't quite realized yet, is that when the government nationalizes things, they're normally pretty bad at it. Like, you look at South Africa at the moment. I don't know if you guys have seen much about what's happening in South Africa at the moment. The government nationalized everything, the ANC, bless them, and it's basically a failed state. It's falling apart. So it happens when the government nationalizes things, because they don't have the incentive. It's not people making money off it and businesses.
Yeah, I think it's also, you talking about like different countries, it's interesting when you think about, if you travel to other countries and you interact with the people there, like for example, I run a nonprofit where I go and like do workshops and stuff with people in different countries, and something that I always hear most places that I go to is that people want to come to the United States. Like it's just a trend. Like if you travel and you go and you see other cultures, a lot of times people are interested in coming to the United States for various reasons, mostly financially. Like if you go to a country that's really struggling and they're not a capitalist society, they want money from the United States. They see a United States person and they say money. Like that's what they look at, you know. So it's something to think about, because I mean, you said you're from Florida, right? Or you live in Florida?
I live in Florida.
Last time I was in Fort Lauderdale, I thought I was in Cuba. And
I mean,
it's really interesting because it shows that like people want to be in the United States. You know, people want to come to America because they see it as not only a place of freedom, but a place for economic gain. So
like I was like born in like the poorest part of the country, like Appalachia, right? And like that's where I'm from. So I think like a lot of my opinions do have to do with seeing the wealth disparity as such a first-hand experience that I think maybe some people like haven't got to see. That it's like, it honestly, like in a lot of ways, it's like there are people that still like have outhouses. You know what I mean?
Okay.
The poor.
Hunter donated $100. This has got to be the most boring conversation. I'm sitting here with my left hand in my pants and have never been more turned off.
We've talked about this for a little too long. I'll have a brief back and forth with you. Please don't anybody else jump in, and then 2 minutes, and then we'll move back. So, Hunter, thank you for your TTS. Appreciate it. So, question for you: if nobody wants to work, and they just want to go in and take the free bread every morning, what happens if you multiply that by everybody? I think you underestimate the degree to which people are lazy.
I mean, maybe, but there's no like indicator for that.
There's no indicator that people are lazy?
Like, or how like many people are lazy, or like whatever. What would happen like over a certain period of time?
What would happen over okay. I mean, there's also this concept of the tragedy of the commons. Like everybody owns something, nobody owns it. Like if collectively everybody owns everything, so nobody's going to give a damn about it, nobody's going to take care of it, and everything just withers into disrepair.
I mean, most people in my generation won't be able to afford a home, so I think it's kind of like the same thing.
Well, I think we can also acknowledge, look, I mean, I think anybody who's in favor of capitalism can obviously acknowledge that it's not perfect, and there's flaws, and there's losers in the system. But I mean, there is no better system that so far devised as capitalism. Because like, okay, you may very well have fair criticisms and valid criticisms of capitalism, but it's not clear to me if the answer is let's just tear it all down and install a new system.
I guess like that would be where my opinion is like it would be the closest thing, like
what, so,
something closer to.
So are you merely just a critic of capitalism?
I guess more so, yeah.
But I mean, you said you're socialist slash communist.
Yeah, that's like the closest thing to identify with for me, or where.
But you can still be in favor of capitalism, but also acknowledge, here's some ways capitalism gets it wrong. Here's some ways we can improve it.
I don't know where I sit on that.
Because the system that you're suggesting that we switch to, communism, is, I mean, it's been attempted, it's failed. I suppose in some perfect way, like if you're expecting people to move in the most idealistic way, then perhaps it could work. But people break rules, people break systems. So if you have imperfect actors who are criminals, for example, you have people that can be greedy. If those greedy people become the people that hold the power, I guess, in this communist society, how's that going to work?
Then it doesn't.
Like corruption.
Like if corruption happens, then that.
Are humans corrupt?
Naturally?
Are humans?
I don't think so.
You don't think?
Naturally? Like, I feel like when there's no incentive to be greedy, which greed usually, like, is their survival, like, instinct, then I don't think naturally most people, like,
well, so how do you
result to corruption.
But so you're saying if there's, like, this base level of sustenance that people could reach, then we would live in some, like, utopia.
I'm not saying, like, everything would be perfect all of the time.
Let's say the standard of living for everyone had health insurance, everybody had food, everybody had a house. You don't think there'd be people that want more?
I think maybe some, but it would be pretty sparse.
Pretty sparse? Okay. All right, okay. We're going to move on from the...